All right, let's get started. What has been affected is the layer above that reserve balances. Those are the accounts that commercial banks hold with the Fed, affects to the banking system and liabilities to the Fed. And that is basically how we pay for those securities. The banking system has a large quantity of those reserves, but they are electronic entries at the Fed. They basically just sit there. They are not in circulation. They are not part of any broad measure of the money supply. They are part of what is called the monetary base, but they certainly are not cash. Then the top layer is other liabilities, including treasury accounts and variety of other things that the Fed does. We act as the fiscal agent for the treasury, but the two main items you can see are the notes in circulation and the reserves held by the banks. So what do the LSEPs or the quantitative easing, what does it do? What do they do? We anticipated when we took these actions that we would be able to lower interest rates, and that was generally successful. For example, 30-year mortgage rates have fallen below 4%, which is a historically low level, but other interest rates have fallen as well. The interest rates corporations have to pay on bonds, for example, have fallen both because the underlying safe rates have fallen, but also because the spreads between corporate bond rates and treasury rates have fallen as well, reflecting greater confidence in the financial markets about the economy. And the lower long term rates, in my view, and the Fed's analysis have promoted the growth and recovery. In the long run, why did he say mentioned growth? Um, Nonetheless, the effect on housing has been weaker than we hoped. We have gotten mortgage rates down very low. We would think that um, would stimulate housing, but the housing market has not yet recovered. Now it's hot. And it's really hard to cool down. But the Fed has a dual mandate. We always have two objectives. One of them is maximum employment, which we interpret to mean trying to keep the economy growing and using its full capacity, and low interest rates are a way of stimulating growth and trying to get people back to work. The second part of our mandate is price stability, low inflation. We have been quite successful in keeping inflation low. It has been a help that Volcker in particular and also Greenspan made it much easier for me because they had already persuaded the markets that the Fed was committed to low inflation, and the Fed has built up a lot of credibility over the past 30 years or so. As a result, markets have been confident that the Fed will keep inflation low. Inflation expectations have stayed low, and except for some swings up and down related to oil prices, overall, inflation has been quite low and stable. At the same time, while we have kept inflation low, we have also made sure that inflation has not gone negative, particularly around the time of QE2 in November 2010. There was concerned that inflation had been falling. It was well below normal levels. The concern was we might get into negative inflation or deflation. Deflation has been a big problem for Japan's economy now for quite a few years. And I talked about deflation also in the context of Great Depression. We certainly wanted to avoid deflation. So monetary ease also guarded against the risk of deflation by making sure that the economy did not get too weak. One more comment on large-scale asset purchases. A lot of people do not distinguish between monetary and fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the spending and taxation tools of the federal government. Monetary policy has to do with the Fed's measurement of interest rates. These are very different tools. And in particular, when the Fed buys assets as part of an LSEP or QE program, this is not a form of government spending. It does not show up as government spending because we are not actually spending money. What we are doing is buying assets, which at some point will be sold back to the market, and so the value of those purchases will be earned back. In fact, because the Fed gets interest on the securities we hold, we actually make a very nice profit on these assets. What we have done over the past 3 years is transfer about $200 billion in profit, 200 billion, to the Treasury. That money goes directly to reducing the deficit. So these actions are not deficit increasing, they are in fact significantly deficit reducing. Then how about reverse repo facilities? That's my question. And the paying interest. So a major tool we used when we ran out of room to lower short-term interest rates was LSATs, asset purchases. It's 0.1%, so 10 basis points. 10.1 trillion. The other tool we have used to some extent is communication about monetary policy. To the extent that we can clearly communicate what we are trying to achieve, investors can better understand our objective and our plans, and that can make monetary policy more effective. The Fed has taken a lot of steps to become more transparent about monetary policy to try to make sure people understand what we are trying to accomplish. For example, 4 times a year after 2-day FOMC meetings, I give a press conference and answer questions about monetary policy decisions. This is a new thing for the Fed in terms of trying to explain what our policies are. Another recent step that we took in communicating our policies more clearly was to put out a statement that described our basic approach to monetary policy, and in particular, for the first time, gave a numerical definition of price stability. Many central banks around the world already have a numerical definition of price stability, and in our statement, we said that for our purposes, we were going to define price stability as 2% inflation. And so, actually, Bank of Korea has way before, I think. And so the markets and Bank of New Zealand, Reserve Bank of New Zealand, And Reserve Bank of Australia also has numeric target before the Fed does, right? Yeah. Because they are explicitly flexible inflation targeting. And so the markets will know that over the medium term, the Fed will try to hit 2% inflation, even as it also tried to hit its objectives for growth and employment. Finally, the Fed has also begun to provide guidance to investors and the public about what we expect to do with the federal funds rate in the future, given how we currently see the economy. So, given how we currently see the economy, we tell the market something about where we think the rates are going to go. The extent to the extent that the market better understands our plans, that is going to help reduce uncertainty in financial markets. And to the extent that our plans are, in some sense, more aggressive than the market anticipated, we will also tend to ease policy conditions. By leaking information, the recession, the period of contraction, which was very, very severe, officially came to an end. There is a committee called the National Bureau of Economic Research, which officially designates the beginning and end dates of recessions. I was a member of that committee before I became a policymaker, and they determined that this recession began in December 2007 and ended in June 2009. So it was a long recession. When they say the recession ended, what that means basically is not that things are back to normal. It just means that the contraction has stopped and the economy is now growing again. So we have been growing now for almost 3 years, averaging about 2.5% a year. But as I described, we are still some distance from being back to normal. So when we say the economy is no longer in the recession, we do not mean that things are great. We just mean that we are no longer actually contracting. We are now growing. Figure 33 gives a picture of the sluggish economic recovery, and I will continue that tomorrow.